Bruins Beat is brought to you by Prizepicks.
And welcome into the Bruins Beat, presented by Prizepicks. Go use that promo code CLNS to get $50 back when you play just $5. I'm Evan Marinofsky. That is Scott McLaughlin. Scott, what is up?
Not much, Evan. What's up with you?
Nothing much. Busy time, obviously, with MIAA playoffs, prep hockey and everything. And then there's the Bruins. Another brutal loss on Thursday night, 2-1 to the Islanders. I'm numb at this point. Like, I don't know what it is, but, I see the fans getting angry on Twitter, and I get it. It makes sense. But I'm just not surprised by any of this. And what's funny is they've actually, they played pretty well the first half against Toronto. They were out shooting the Islanders by a ton for most of Thursday's game. They played well in the second half against the Ducks, but they're losing. And it's just, I'm not surprised by any of it. What about you?
Yeah, the problem, and this has been a problem all year, but now, especially when you don't have Charlie McAvoy or Hampus Lindholm, is there's no margin for error. So they can play well, but because they lack true offensive talent outside of David Pastrnak, they still don't score, even if they do actually create some chances or offensive zone time. And then defensively, if they make one mistake, there's a chance it ends up in the back of the net. I think Jeremy Swayman has regressed a bit again. And obviously, just talent-wise, when you don't have McAvoy and Lindholm, your back end isn't as good. You're rolling out Zadorov and Carlo or Zadorov and Peak as your top pairings, or Lohrei gets, is that now averaging over 20 minutes a game. And I think he's had some really good games recently, but there's still the mistakes as well. And it's another team with more offensive talent might be able to outscore some of this and cover it up and still get some points, but that's not them. They just, if they make a couple mistakes, it's a loss. And that's kind of where they are right now, because they can't get everything together at once. Even a game like Toronto, where they score 4 goals, they give up 5. It's just it's
gave up only 2 on Thursday though, and they scored 1.
Right. So this is kind of what the whole season's been, but I think it's even more glaring at this point.
Yeah, they've been short all year. When one thing is working, another thing isn't. It's been the case all season. We saw at the beginning of the year, a lot of guys weren't producing, and then once guys start producing, there's injuries and you're still finding ways to lose. And, they've lost 5 in a row now. And, again, there are lots of things you can break down from these games. And so, as you said, Swayman's regressed. And Scott, I think it boils down to this. It ain't their year. It's just not their year. And I think you heard that from Brad Marchand after the game of some years you don't have it. You tweeted the video. I don't have the quote right in front of me. But it essentially, in so many words, he basically says it's not their year. And he also mentioned an interesting point of gearing up for next year and assuming that he's going to be here next year, which I found interesting. Now, obviously, he wants to be a Bruin for life. No doubt about that. But Sweeney's comments on Sunday didn't make it sound like he's here for good. At least his comments didn't.
No, I think there's real work that both sides need to do to figure out what his next contract looks like. I do think there's mutual interest in Brad Marchand remaining a Bruin. He clearly wants to stay here. I think Don Sweeney's being genuine when he says it's his goal to keep Marchand here. But what those terms look like is, I think, very much up for debate. If they're at a situation where the Bruins want to go year to year, or are hoping, hey, Brad, can you do us a solid, take a team-friendly deal, we can put more around you. Marchand, who has said he wants to play until he's 40, is currently 37. He might be looking for a 3-year deal and more security. Yep. He's been underpaid for years. He might still be looking to get paid market value or something close to it. So, those are real differences that have to be worked out. And I don't necessarily think they need to get a deal done before March 7th, before the trade deadline, but I think they have to know that there's a path towards getting one done. If it feels like both sides are kind of entrenched and aren't going to budge, well, now that's where a trade, I think, becomes a real option, because you don't want to risk him walking and losing him for nothing in the offseason. Like that would kind of be, that would pretty much be a disaster.
Completely. And I think, the tough part about the Marchand trade debate is there really are pros and cons to both sides, which sounds cliche, but it's true. And I think there's reasons that you would want to trade him, and there are reasons that you wouldn't. I think one of the reasons you would is because he's your most valuable trade chip. Like, I believe you could get a first and, maybe a prospect, maybe a younger player with some control. Like, there's value there that could jumpstart a retool. But then there's the other end of it where it's like, is anybody ready in that locker room to step up and be the captain? If you're going to compete next year, if you want to compete, which I imagine that they do, given they have a lot of money tied up in a lot of guys on this roster. And, it was just last year that they were playoff contenders and in the playoffs. And he helps you. You don't have a lot of depth on the wings going forward. You don't have guys coming. You don't have a lot of depth coming up. You don't have a lot of depth on the current roster. Zacha was supposed to be a wing earlier this year, but was forced to move back to the middle. It's worked, but you don't have a ton on the wings. So there's also that end of it too, where like, if you're going to compete, if you feel you're going to compete next year, he's in your top 6 for sure. And you can rely on 25 goals, somewhere in the range of 50 to 70 points. 70 might be a little too high for him at this stage in his career. And it depends on who they have around him. But that's why I think it's a tough call, but I think it's worth discussing. And I believe if the Bruins get a good enough offer and you don't think you can come to a contract that works for both sides, I don't know how you don't do it.
Right. Yeah. You're exactly right. Like this team is already at least one legitimate top 6 player short. And really, if you look just at the wings, it's at least one top 6 wing short. Like, all right, you got Pastrnak, Marchand, even aging, is still a second line winger.
Agreed.
Morgan Geekie has absolutely performed like a top 6 winger, and he has chemistry with Pastrnak, which should not be ignored. And by the way, like, his name's also out there in trade rumors. And then you have just a glaring hole where it's like, with all due respect to Charlie Coyle, I think we've seen this year he's not a second line winger. He's certainly not producing like one. So, like, you're already looking for one. If Marchand's gone and or Geekie's gone, now you're looking for 2, maybe 3. And like, I hate to break it to people, but you're not adding 2 or 3 top 6 wingers. And
Mikko Rantanen is not walking through that door.
Right? Yeah, I mean, like, if you had like a superstar like that really helps balance it out. Now maybe you can get by with having someone a little weaker in your top 6, but the Bruins are trying to fill holes like between now and the start of next season, not create more of them, because then you are starting to talk about a little longer retool where it's like, well, maybe it's not even going to happen next season, and now we're looking 2 seasons out, which is it. That might be what they have to end up doing, but like, it's a tougher sell. And, we know the Jacobs probably don't have the appetite for anything longer term. So yeah, like ideally they're trying to be competitive again next year.
And this is the thing. I see some fans on Twitter, and I know it's just Twitter, so it's not everything. It's not everybody, but there are fans who are like, they need to blow it up. I saw you put out a poll, and I think it was like split between a retool and a rebuild, correct? Like there are fans out there who believe that they want a full tear down rebuild, like start from the freaking bottom of the house and work your way up. If there's any market that couldn't handle that kind of rebuild, it's this one. I know you guys well enough to know that you wouldn't want this. It would be horrible. Right now, they are unwatchable. And we think they're unwatchable, but they would be even more unwatchable if you took away any bit of talent they had and replaced them with younger guys or inexperienced guys or draft picks that you hope cash in down the road. It's just the case. And we've discussed this a number of times, right? Like, seems like Montreal is coming out of it. Okay. Chicago's going through it. Buffalo can't get themselves out of it. Detroit seems to finally be pulling themselves out. So, like, I just, why do you want that? You have Pastrnak, you have McAvoy. Swayman's been bad this year for sure, but I'm a firm believer of give him a full training camp, give him a coach that, give him a coach, a new coach next year, all that stuff. Not goalie Bob. I mean, like, when they probably inevitably do hire a new coach after the season. I said, you have the foundations there. You just need to trim the fat around the foundation to make it a little bit better. And that's easier said than done. They also never replaced Jake DeBrusk after last offseason. So that's another top 6 winger that you're missing. Not saying that they 100% should have went out and got him, but I will die on the hill of, instead of maybe Nikita Zadorov, you spend that money on no scoring winger. Might have helped you. Might have helped you out a little bit this year. I just... And then you get to the whole element of next year. Are they actually going to be able to compete? Are they going to be, cup? Could they potentially be cup contenders? Or are we looking at, 2015-16, 2016-17, where they're bubble team that's a tough watch at times? I want to get to that. But first, our friends over at Prizepicks. Prizepicks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prizepicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long over at Prizepicks. They invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. Prizepicks, they also put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my picks in as quick as 15 minutes. And Prizepicks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Bruins-wise, not a lot to pick from. Not a whole bunch to pick from. I would go with David Pastrnak and Morgan Geekie. Anything with them, those would be my 2. Outside of that, it's tough. Look around the league, though, for some good ones. So if you want to do that, download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prizepicks, run your game. Run your game. So next season, Scott, already looking to next season. I think part of the negotiation with Marchand is going to be, I think the Bruins have to be realistic with what they are going to be. Are they going to be a team that's right back in it next year? And I think there's a legitimate case for that. Or are they going to be a team that needs a couple years to reset itself, which I think there's also a legitimate argument for that. And if Marchand, he clearly wants to be here. I get that. But does he really want to embrace potentially not competing for a cup the next 2 years? That's what I keep going back to.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting to hear Marchand after Thursday's game. You kind of reference it, but essentially acknowledging that this season might not go the way that they want it to, because he has been really unflinchingly optimistic about this team pretty much at every point prior to Thursday night. Even just earlier this week, he was saying, I think this team can do some damage if we get into the playoffs. But now that if we get into the playoffs is becoming, more and more of like a major if, where it was like, all right, they're right there. They're a point out there. They're only 2 points out. Well, now you're 4 points out. And there's a danger of slipping even further. So, I think Marchand is the kind of guy who is going to believe that they can get it back on track for next season. I think he still believes that if they make a run, if they get hot and get in this season, they can make some noise. I just think he has that sort of I really do like this group, and I think we could figure it out. He's not going to give up until the season's over, until it's just mathematically over. So yeah, I think he would want to be part of it, because I think he does think it could happen quickly. Whether that's realistic, of course we can have maybe more of an honest debate about it, because it's going to be tough, right? They're not just one piece of. Now, look, if you tell me they can go and get a legit number one center, then I'd say, okay, maybe they're just one piece away, and like maybe
Quinn Byfield, bingo, there it is.
Yeah,
you're
like maybe everything else falls into line after that. But short of that, because we know how hard that is to acquire, well, then you have to build up everything else around it. Like if you're going to get by with, without a true number one center, then you better have multiple elite wings, not just David Pastrnak. Your defense and goaltending better be a strength. It was supposed to be this year, and it hasn't been. So you better figure out a way to make sure it is next year. So whether that's upgrading your defense, just getting better play from the guys you have, maybe Mason Lohrei takes another step. You obviously are going to need Swayman to be better than he's been this year. So there's a lot of things that have to turn around and improve. However you get there, your special team is going to have to be way better.
Agreed.
You just can't win in the NHL with bad special teams, with both units near the bottom of the league. So whether that's new coaching, new bodies on those units, something in those players that takes to another level, like, gotta turn that around. Like, have to at least be middle of the pack in both, if not better. So, yeah, like that's a lot, and it might not happen in one off season. So, I think what the Bruins have to be careful of is falling into the trap that they made this year, which is, hey, we have money to spend, and we can land. You identify the guys you want to spend money on, and you just go do it. And it's like, okay, we all understood the reasoning behind giving those contracts to Elias Lindholm and Nikita Zadorov. Like, I'm with you. I probably would have gone scoring wing over Zadorov, but I also understood what they were thinking with that. Like, they legitimately felt like they needed to get tougher on the back end to hold up against forechecks and teams that crash on the net like Florida. Like, I get it. It hasn't worked. So you can't now go into this offseason and just be like, we'll just willy-nilly go spend on two big free agents. Not Willie Nylander. I'm saying, willy-nilly. Like,
that's what you meant. That was a subtle messaging.
Right.
Scott McLaughlin reports through willy-nilly that they're going to go get Willie Nylander.
Mitch Marner might be out there, but no. But like, yeah, you can't just throw around money like crazy and risk two more bad contracts. So they're gonna have to be smart about what they do, and it's not going to be easy.
No, it won't. And I think that's why, like, you hit on it for next year, they should be better on D. You'll have a healthy McAvoy, you'll have a healthy Hampus Lindholm. So that's an upgrade. I agree. You need Zadorov to be better, which I'm not sure he can be. We'll see with Carlo what they do if they decide to move him at the deadline. That would signal to me a little bit bigger of a retool, but you probably would get something legit for Carlo. Like, that would be, and I was even reading in The Athletic, Jonas Siegel had a story on, the Leafs potentially trading for Coyle. And he mentioned like a first and a young roster player with some control, like a Nick Robertson, who looked great the other night, or Simone Benoit. So, again, you could get a lot for them, but you hit on it with up front. Like, are you going to be that much better offensively next year? Is there a way to do it? And, they thought they had their number one center in Elias Lindholm. It doesn't seem that that's the case. I'm willing to be open-minded about him next year, but I'm still not confident he can be the number one guy that we all kind of thought he could be. And then it comes down to the wings. Like, do you have the horses on the wings? They clearly don't have the necessary amount of skill or speed or finishing ability up front. They just don't. I mean, the Zacha line is the only line right now that's really producing at 5-on-5. Even the Lindholm, Marchand, Coyle line isn't doing a heck of a lot 5-on-5 either. So I don't know. But then you get into the element of, like, I think cup chasing can be a little dangerous if you're a veteran player. Now, Marchand has his cup, so he can stay here and be like, no, I'm fine. Like, if I'm going to win a cup anywhere, I want to win it here, which I think is what his mindset ultimately is. And I think, he sticks around here. It's contrary to what people believe, it's a good organization. They want to win. They're willing to invest. Maybe it is the safest place to be here. Maybe he doesn't win a cup at 38. Instead, he, or not win a cup. I mean, competing for a cup at 38, but maybe he's competing for a cup when he's 40 and he's a third line guy or a fourth line guy. Now, again, what's he making? I don't know. but that might be his view of it too. Of, just I want to go to Winnipeg, like Jerome McGinley at the end of his career, where it's like, I'm going to go to Pittsburgh, I'm going to go to LA, and you start jumping around, and it makes it harder. Or I think it was Marion He ended up winning a bunch with the Blackhawks, but remember he went to the Penguins the year the Red Wings won, and he went to the Red Wings the year the Penguins won.
Against
incredible.
each other. Yeah.
Yes. The late 2000s. But that's my other thing with him is I just think you start to get into the cup chasing realm, jumping from team to team, if that's what he decided to do. And it gets a little dangerous.
I mean, look at Steven Stamkos. Like, obviously, Tampa didn't want to keep Steven Stamkos. They decided to go after Jake Gensel, but Stamkos thinks he's going to a great situation in Nashville because they're spending all this money, and it's been a disaster this season. Like, they're not making the playoffs, and now they're trying to figure out how to do their own retools. So, you do. There's obvious ones where it's like, if he gets traded to the Edmonton Oilers this season, like, they're a contender. Doesn't mean they're going to win a cup, but like, that's a team that's in good shape. But yeah, short of that, there's other teams that are riskier. Or if you go into the offseason and he signs a 3-year deal somewhere because he is looking for term, it could turn into Jerome McGinley going to the Avs, where McGinley thought he was going to a good situation because Colorado had, pretty good season the year before. And then they took like a huge step back, and all of a sudden he's looking around like, what did I get myself into? So, sometimes, the team and the organization that is the better choice than the one you don't, where you think
the
you're
devil
getting something good. Yeah, exactly.
The devil is better than the devil you don't. In terms of the rest of the year, I know obviously the trade deadline is the big one in terms of who they're going to deal, who they should look to deal, what they can get back, assets, all that. But for the people who enjoy watching the game, which is not many at this point, most are not having a great time watching the Bruins at the moment. What are you looking for the rest of the year? I'll give you one. Mason Lohrei. Mason Lohrei is going to get a lot of minutes. He already is. I think he's averaging like 20 minutes a night. Since Lindholm and McAvoy went down. So him just getting more reps, making more mistakes, working through those mistakes, I think that's one area to keep an eye on. What are things that you're looking for down the stretch?
Yeah, along the same lines, like it's the young guys. It's Matt Patra as well, who fortunately seems to be okay after a real freak injury Thursday night, getting shoved into an open door at the Islanders bench. He practiced on Friday. So, but what does he do the rest of the way? I think for the most part, he looks pretty good and he creates chances, but also he's now gone 19 games without a goal at the NHL level. So getting into better scoring positions, do they get him better line mates at some point? That the third line has been really just a black hole. Like that they've gotten nothing from it. Trent Frederick was very quiet before his injury. Justin Brazeau, I think, has now gone 10 games without a point. You have Riley Tufte there, who doesn't have a shot on goal in 5 games in the NHL this season. So how Patra plays, how he continues to develop. He got time in the third period against Toronto in a game that the Bruins were trying to protect a 1-goal lead. Stuff like that is important for his development. Those are situations that last year and even earlier this season he was not being used in. And then do guys get called up? We have to see Georgi Merkulov at some point.
The guy has done everything at the AHL level to warrant
he's leading Providence in scoring for a third straight year. The Bruins are getting 0 offense from their bottom 6. It's like there is nothing to lose by giving him some time. And he's earning it with his play down there. Now, Fabian Lysell has hit a quieter stretch in Providence. I think he has to force their hand a little bit. But I think there's open spots on this roster now, and there's probably going to be a couple more after the trade deadline.
100%. I think that's the big thing with the deadline is and my whole thing with trading Frederick, people are like, oh, you got to get a young player back with control in return for Frederick. And it's like, you don't. Get a 2nd round pick. Or get a draft pick or picks and bring up Merkulov. That to me seems like the most logical move to replace Frederick. And I think you would have no problem doing so. Frederick's given you no production for most of this year. I also look at like away from the young guys, like an Elias Lindholm. Can he turn it around in the last month of the season? Can he end on somewhat of a high note for next year? Because next year's big. I mean, again, I mentioned earlier, he'll have, I'd assume he'll be 100% for training camp. I think he was dealing with something this year, they mentioned.
Yeah, he suffered like some sort of injury on the very first day of training camp.
Welcome to Boston.
Yeah.
Just right off on the wrong foot. So like him, I wonder, can you salvage him to be like a reliable, likely second line center next year? I still don't know where they're getting that first line center from for next year. I don't know where that's, again, maybe the move is you have Zacha at 1, Lindholm at 2, and you beef up on the wings talent wise. I don't mean like get a bunch of 6'6" guys on the wings, things like that. I mean like get some skill, get some speed.
I was gonna say, they already have that. They got Riley Tufte and Justin.
That's right. That's right. They've got the heft. They just need a little bit of speed, So I don't know. I think down the stretch, you're also looking for Swayman. Can Swayman sort of stabilize a bit? He looked like he was in January and early February. So I also wonder with him if he can get something going. I think it's just and you also have the element of, and this, I hate saying this, like this feels wrong, but can you get the highest possible draft pick? Can you lose enough like you did on Thursday where the young guys still develop and you get like the 7th overall pick at the end of the year, the 6th overall pick? Now it's loser mentality. I hate that mentality, but I think you're at that point.
Yeah, I think seeing if this season goes either way, like up or down, because look, I know like none of us are expecting it, but it's not completely out of the realm of possibility that they still make a push for a playoff spot.
Agreed.
They are still only 4 points out, and like Detroit, Columbus, it's like, all right, they've gotten a little bit hot recently, but they've both had plenty of struggles this season. Ottawa has really fallen off. Like, they could still go that way too, where it's like all of a sudden, we get to the last couple of weeks of the season and it's like, hey, why not try to make the playoffs and just see what happens, right? Like, there's guys on this team who could benefit from playoff experience. 100%. We mentioned Lorai, Patra. Like, Swayman getting more playoff experience would be good after a really strong spring last year. Just seeing how Elias Lindholm plays in the play, like, he would get tough matchups in a playoff series. They might not win the series. It might not even go deep, but like, see how he does in those matchups and learn a little bit about that. Same with Nikita Zadorov, right? He was brought in for playoff hockey. Be nice to see what he does, even if it's for 5 or 6 games. So that there is also a benefit to that, but you're right. Then the other way is, hey, they've lost 5 in a row already right now. If they keep sliding, yeah, we're going to be looking at like, all right, what kind of pick can they end up with? And
we're going to be analyzing film.
Yeah, who can they target? And what are their odds on the lottery again? Like, yeah, we're going to be doing all that.
We'll be looking at the combine stats in Buffalo, being like, oh, he's great pull-ups, but his vertical is not that great. I don't want him. Nothing to do with him.
You already have all that information, Evan. You've been out there measuring it.
That's right. I have it. It's all right here. It's all right here. I got all my info that I need right here. It's tough, right? Because I think this team needs to kind of take a year to retool and pick high and get as many picks as you can and just kind of replenish with young guys in the system. But I get the other end of it too, where you do have legitimate pieces on this team who would get more playoff experience. They're not going deep. They aren't. I don't believe in this roster going past a round at all. But I agree with you in that I could absolutely see them getting in because the rest of the East is not good. They shouldn't be in the spot they're in. They shouldn't be 4 points out of the wild card. It feels like they should be 10. You know what I mean? And now they're still in the picture.
Right. And also, like, we're not accounting for the fact that if you got Bruins Maple Leafs in the first round again, like, this could have the potential to be the most hilarious Bruins Maple Leafs playoff series yet.
Be amazing. Are you kidding me? Imagine if the Bruins as the final wild card, or even the first, getting because the Capitals will likely be one. So they'd have to be Bruins have to be the first wild card, and they get the Leafs and beat them. Oh, that'd be worth it. Screw the draft pick. That sold me. That's what I want. That would be worth every second of that run down the stretch. If that like no McAvoy potentially, no Lindholm. So it's just Nikita Zadorov and Andrew Peeke like shutting down Austin Matthews. I'll take that. I will take that. That's a reason to watch the rest of the season. Scott, what can the people look forward to from you over at EEI?
We got Sunday skate every Sunday, 9 to 11 a.m. We got the skate pod going multiple times a week and plenty of written stuff on WEI.com.
Go check all that out. Scott, always a pleasure, my friend. I'm sure I'll see you around soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, Evan.
Of course. That's Bruins Beat. I'm Evan Marinofsky, Bruins Beat listeners. Have a great rest of your week.